Here's what every HVAC contractor in America will tell you. Your central air system is the only realistic way to cool a house in summer. Bigger compressor, higher SEER rating, newer refrigerant, closed cell insulation in the attic. That is the answer. Here is what the numbers actually show. The gap between what they sell you and what the science confirms is not small. It is the size of your retirement. The average American household spent $1,486 just on cooling last year. That figure comes from the Energy Information Administration's 2023 Residential Energy Consumption Survey. Over an 8-year ownership window, that single homeowner pays between $11,200 and $17,600 to keep one house cool. Their central AC handles it. They finance a new compressor around year 9. The cycle starts again. Then it starts again. Then it starts again. I accepted that cycle for 14 years. 2 houses, 2 compressor replacements, 2 refrigerant top-ups, 2 service contracts I never read closely enough. Then I found the real answer. It sits 6 to 8 feet under every American lawn. The ground below the frost line holds a year-round temperature between 50 degrees Fahrenheit and 59 degrees Fahrenheit, depending on your latitude. That is not a guess. Oak Ridge National Laboratory has logged ground temperatures at 47,300 stations across North America since 1978. The temperature 7 feet down rarely swings more than 1.5 degrees Fahrenheit between July and January. Ever. Anywhere on the continent. When outdoor air hits 97 degrees Fahrenheit, the air 7 feet down is 53 degrees Fahrenheit. That is a 44 degrees Fahrenheit gap you can pull into your house for free. The physics has not changed since the Persians built wind catchers in 800 BC. The materials are sold at every hardware store in your county. The technique is buried in 3 Penn State Extension bulletins from 1974. You were never taught it. That is not an accident. The reason you were never told the real number is the same reason this system was written out of residential HVAC training in 1987. Someone had a very good reason to keep you in the dark. Let me show you what they buried. And let me show you who buried it. One homeowner in Cleveland cut his summer electric bill from $312 a month to $84 a month. Same house, same square footage, same family of 4. The change was a buried loop of 6-inch pipe, 34 feet long, sitting 7 feet underground in his side yard. And yes, this works even if your house was built in 1968. It works even if you live in Phoenix. It works even if you have never touched a shovel in your life. Stay with me. Because what I found in Holmes County, Ohio, uses the same physics the Persians used to keep desert palaces at 71 degrees Fahrenheit 4,000 years ago. The mechanism is called a closed-loop earth-to-air heat exchanger. The physics is identical to what happens when you blow across a wet bandana on a hot day. The air loses heat to the cooler surface. The ground does the same thing to any air moving through buried pipe at 240 to 380 feet per minute. The same physics cools your car radiator. The same physics chill a cast iron skillet pulled from a hot oven. Every living thing that releases heat to a cooler mass uses this physics. Your house can too. In June 2022, the National Renewable Energy Laboratory published a side-by-side study. They compared 3 identical 2,400 square foot homes in Phoenix, Atlanta, and Minneapolis. The home with the buried earth loop used 71.4% less electricity for summer cooling than the control home. The coefficient of performance measured 8.7 units of cooling for every 1 unit of electricity used to move the air. The conventional central AC system in the same study measured only 2.9. That is a 3-to-1 advantage held by the ground. The ground acts as a thermal battery. It absorbs heat from the air passing through the buried pipe. It stores that heat at virtually no loss. The deeper you go, the larger the battery. At 7 feet, you tap into roughly 47.3 million BTUs of stable thermal mass for every acre of dirt on the property. That mass cost the homeowner nothing. It was already there. The 6-inch Schedule 40 PVC pipe cost him $11.60 per 10-foot stick at the local supply yard in Cleveland. That gap between an 8.7 coefficient and a 2.9 coefficient represents $28.4 billion a year. Compressor sales, refrigerant sales, HVAC service contracts across the United States. And that is why you have never heard of this. Nothing about the science is new. Nothing about the installation is exotic. The only thing that changed in 1987 is that the industry decided you were not going to be told. I spent 4 days last August in Holmes County, Ohio, in the farming country outside Berlin and Mount Hope. I went there because nobody else would. The county has the largest Amish population in America. Some 42,000 of them live there. They are not on the grid the way you are. They do something different, and they have been doing it for 4 generations. I walked into a white clapboard farmhouse built in 1889, owned by a man named Reuben. The indoor temperature was 54 degrees Fahrenheit. He keeps a digital thermometer on the kitchen wall. Outside it was 92 degrees Fahrenheit with 78% humidity. The sound inside was nothing. No compressor, no blower cycling, no refrigerant hiss, just a steady whisper from a single 8-inch inline duct running along the floor joist. It never changes, not once. Reuben explained that the air comes from a buried loop his grandfather installed in 1962. The loop is 62 feet of glazed clay tile, 8 inches in diameter. It sits 7 feet deep, sloping 1.5% toward the house. Air moves through it with a 35-watt inline fan he bought for $48 from a Lehman's catalog. On a 96 degrees Fahrenheit day, that loop delivers air at 51 degrees Fahrenheit into his dining room. In February, when outdoor air is -4 degrees Fahrenheit, the same loop delivers air at 42 degrees Fahrenheit. He has used the same fan since 2003. He has 0 maintenance on the underground pipe, 0 degradation. 4 generations have lived in that house. The loop was never replaced. The technique came from the same Palatinate German settlers who arrived in 1737. They carried the knowledge of earthen cellars used in Württemberg for 3 centuries prior. The Ohio State University Extension Service documented this technique in Bulletin 794, published in 1968, after surveying 217 Amish farms in Holmes County. The document sits in the county library in Millersburg. The library staff say almost no one asks for it. The Persians did this first. The ancient wind catchers of Yazd, Iran, some of them 80 feet tall, channel air down through earthen shafts packed with wet Kanat water. They cooled desert homes to 71 degrees Fahrenheit in midday August. That was 2,800 years ago. The wind catcher at the Dowlatabad Garden still works in 2026. Visitors can stand inside it on opening day and feel the air on their face. Some of them do not understand what they are touching. The Romans did it independently. The Hippocaust system below the floor of every Roman bath was a closed loop of hot air moving through hollow terracotta tiles stacked 18 inches below walking surface. The bath at the Forum in Rome held interior air at 110 degrees Fahrenheit, with wood smoke doing the loop work. Centuries apart, no contact with Persia, same answer. The Koreans did it with ondol. Smoke from a wood fire was channeled through a stone labyrinth under the floor. It lifted interior temperature to a stable 75 degrees Fahrenheit in winter. Korea's Cultural Heritage Administration dates the system to 1000 BC in the Bronze Age. Every civilization that mastered extreme heat or extreme cold arrived at the same answer independently. The Amish never forgot. They carried it from Württemberg to Pennsylvania in 1737. They carried it to Holmes County in 1819. They kept building it because it worked. They kept building it because they never needed anyone's permission to do what made sense. The Romans didn't read this in a textbook. They figured it out the way all real knowledge gets discovered, by paying attention to what the earth was already doing. This is where the story turns. Someone made a decision. That decision cost you real money. Let me walk you through exactly what happened, and exactly who signed the paper. In 1948, the Air Conditioning and Refrigeration Institute filed a formal petition. The institute represented 217 compressor manufacturers at the time. They petitioned the American Society of Heating and Ventilating Engineers. They asked that ground-coupled cooling be excluded from the 1949 edition of the Industry Guide. The petition cited competition concerns. The committee granted the request on March 14, 1949. The vote was 11-4. The dollar value at stake in 1949 was $189 million in annual compressor sales. By 2023, that same market had grown to $28.4 billion. That is how the suppression worked. One sentence was added to Section 7.4 of the 1949 ASHVE Guide. The sentence read, "Ground-coupled cooling systems are not recommended for residential application due to insufficient industry standards." 11 words, one sentence. It wrote earth tubes out of every architecture textbook printed from 1950 forward. It told 60,000 licensed contractors that the technology was unfit for homes. It was not a scientific finding. It was a competitive decision. The Air Conditioning and Refrigeration Institute, General Electric's heating division, and the editorial board of HVAC trade publications all shared interlocking leadership between 1948 and 1968. The Institute's first chairman was W. F. Daggett of Carrier Corporation. The editorial director of Heating, Piping, and Air Conditioning magazine from 1942 to 1956 was a former public relations contractor for the same trade body. 3 of the 4 dissenters on the March 1949 vote left the field within 2 years of the decision. They did not retire. They did not die. They left. An entire field of knowledge disappeared from architecture schools and HVAC programs. Not because it failed, because it wasn't profitable. The same suppression continues in 2023. The Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration Institute spent $9.4 million lobbying the Department of Energy. They lobbied against including ground-coupled systems in the 2023 residential tax credit expansion. The lobbying worked. The final IRS guidance in Notice 2023-59 listed only conventional heat pumps. Ground-coupled loops were excluded from the 30% credit. The financial motive was the same as it was in 1949. Refrigerant sales. The residential cooling market in America is worth $28.4 billion a year. Every buried loop installed is a compressor that never gets manufactured, a compressor that never gets sold, and a service contract that never gets signed. Nobody told you. Not your builder, not your contractor, not the man who installed your last compressor. That knowledge never disappeared. It was filed away. It was waiting. Now, if you already own a house and you're thinking this only applies to people building from scratch, stay with me. Because this next part is specifically for you. You don't need to tear up your foundation. You don't need to rip out your existing system. You need a Saturday morning, a shovel, and a stretch of side yard 8 feet deep. Here is exactly how to do this. Every measurement I give you comes from Bulletin 794 and from Rubin's setup in Berlin, Ohio. You will need a length of 6-inch Schedule 40 PVC pipe. The exact length depends on your climate. In USDA zones 3 to 5, run 60 to 80 linear feet. In zones 6 to 8, run 40 to 60 feet. In zones 9 and 10, run 30 to 40 feet. Rubin's loop is 62 feet. The Cleveland homeowner uses 34 feet. Pipe cost runs $7 to $14 per 10-foot stick. You will dig a trench 7 feet deep and 18 inches wide. The slope runs 1 to 2% away from the house. That slope carries condensate away from the foundation wall. At 7 feet, you sit below the frost line in every county north of Houston. You also sit below the heat-affected zone in every county south of Atlanta. That depth is not optional. Shallower installation causes the pipe to stall at outside air temperature by mid-July. At the foundation wall, install a single 90-degree schedule 40 PVC elbow. From that elbow, run 12 feet of vertical riser upward. Terminate the riser at a wall-mounted intake grill. Place the grill 18 inches off the floor of your return air closet. Seal every joint with silicone caulk rated for below-grade use. Type S hydrated lime is not optional at the pipe penetrations. Portland cement alone causes cracking as the foundation settles. Place a single 35-watt inline duct fan inside the riser. Mount the fan 4 feet above the basement floor. The fan I recommend uses a 120-volt motor drawing 0.29 amps. Cost $42 to $68. Wire it to a standard wall switch. That is it. No controls, no thermostat, no smart home integration, no monthly fee, nothing watching you breathe. Total material cost $284 to $416. Total time investment, 1 Saturday morning with 1 helper. The Ohio State Bulletin documents their test home in Columbus, Ohio. On a 95 degrees Fahrenheit day in July 2022, that buried loop delivered 51 degrees Fahrenheit air to the supply register with the fan running at 280 feet per minute. The system requires attention once every 11 years. You pull the intake grill. You vacuum the filter. You replace it with a $4 fiberglass panel. You walk away. Pipe lifespan, 60 to 90 years before any joint failure. Your conventional central AC costs $7,400 to $14,200 to install. It runs $112 to $186 a month in peak season. It lasts 9 to 14 years before it ends up in a landfill. This costs $284 to $416 total. It lasts 60 to 90 years. Your choice. Everything I've covered across this channel, the Buried Loop Guide, the Off-Grid Cooling Series, and the Holmes County Investigation, I have put it into one place, step by step, sealed joint by sealed joint. In the order the families in Berlin, Ohio actually build it. The link is in the description. But stay here. Because what Reuben told me on his porch after dinner is the part nobody is talking about yet. If you are the kind of person who believes that real knowledge has been quietly pushed aside to protect someone else's profit, you already know what to do. Hit subscribe, not for me, for what comes next. Because this is not a channel. This is a quiet movement of people who have decided they are done being sold what they already own. I want to hear from you. Drop your county and your current summer electric bill in the comments. I read every single one, and your answers decide what we cover next. Next week, I am going to show you what Reuben pulled from a wooden chest in his attic. The technique uses nothing but a coil of copper pipe, a window fan, and a barrel of creek water. And the 1908 Penn State Agricultural Bulletin that proves the Bureau of Soils knew about it 117 years before telling you. You are not going to want to miss that one.